Marcus Blackwood had ruled the supernatural underworld of New Orleans for over 3 centuries. His mansion on Royal Street stood like a dark monument to his power, its Gothic architecture hiding secrets that would terrify ordinary mortals. The locals whispered about the mysterious owner who never appeared during daylight hours, but none dared investigate too closely. On this particular evening, Marcus was supposed to be attending the Vampire Council meeting in Atlanta until dawn. The gathering happened only once every 50 years, where ancient bloodlines discussed territorial disputes and new laws governing their kind. As the most powerful vampire king in the southern states, his presence was not just expected but demanded. However, the meeting had ended earlier than anticipated. A territorial dispute between 2 lesser vampire clans had been resolved quickly when both parties realized they were encroaching on Marcus's domain. Nobody wanted to anger the Vampire King of New Orleans. His reputation for swift and brutal justice preceded him everywhere. Marcus decided to return home immediately instead of waiting until his planned arrival the next evening. He could have called ahead, but he preferred the element of surprise. Generous in his long existence, he had learned that unexpected returns often revealed the true nature of those around him. Servants became careless when they thought their master was away. The flight from Atlanta took less than 2 hours, and by midnight, Marcus was walking through the wrought iron gates of his estate. The mansion loomed before him, its windows glowing with warm yellow light. Strange, he thought. Usually, only a few lights remained on when he was away, just enough for security purposes. As he approached the front door, Marcus noticed something unusual. The scent of multiple humans lingered in the air. More than just his regular household staff, his enhanced vampire senses picked up at least 6 different heartbeats inside the mansion, when there should have been only 3. His longtime butler, James, his head of security, Robert, and his personal maid, Elena. Elena Rodriguez had been working for Marcus for 5 years. She was a young woman from a local family that had served his household for generations. Her grandmother and mother had worked for previous occupants of the mansion before Marcus purchased it. Elena was different from the others, though. She showed no fear in his presence, treated him with respect but not the trembling terror most humans displayed around vampires. Marcus had grown fond of Elena's quiet efficiency and calm demeanor. She managed his household affairs perfectly, never asked unnecessary questions, and had proven completely trustworthy with his supernatural secrets. In return, he paid her family very well and ensured their protection from other supernatural threats that occasionally wandered into New Orleans. Using his supernatural speed and stealth, Marcus moved silently around the perimeter of his mansion. Through the tall windows, he could see into the main drawing room. What he witnessed made his centuries-old blood run cold with fury. 5 men in expensive suits were seated in his antique furniture, drinking his rare wine collection, and laughing loudly. Marcus recognized them immediately. They were members of the Castellano crime family, one of the most dangerous human criminal organizations in Louisiana. Their leader, Vincent Castellano, was notorious for his involvement in human trafficking, drug distribution, and extortion. But what shocked Marcus most was seeing Elena moving among these criminals, serving them drinks and appearing completely comfortable in their presence. She was not being held against her will or threatened. Instead, she was laughing at their jokes and seemed to be part of whatever gathering was taking place in his absence. Marcus's enhanced hearing allowed him to pick up fragments of their conversation. They were discussing routes through the city, talking about shipments arriving at the docks, and mentioning large sums of money. It sounded suspiciously like they were planning some kind of criminal operation, and they were doing it in his home, with his trusted maid apparently helping them. The Vampire King felt a rage building inside him that he hadn't experienced in decades. Not only had his household been violated, but Elena, whom he had trusted completely, appeared to be betraying that trust. The thought that she might be involved with criminals was bad enough, but using his home as their meeting place was absolutely unforgivable. Marcus circled back toward the servants' entrance, planning to enter quietly and observe more before taking action. As he moved past the kitchen window, he heard Elena's voice more clearly. She was in the adjacent room, and her tone sounded different than it had in the drawing room. There was tension in her voice, and she seemed to be speaking to someone else. "I don't care what Vincent promised you," Elena was saying to someone Marcus couldn't see. "This is wrong, and you know it. Mr. Blackwood has been good to our family. He doesn't deserve this." A male voice responded, and Marcus recognized it as Elena's younger brother, Diego. "Elena, you don't understand. These people don't give you choices. When Vincent Castellano tells your family they're going to help him, you help him, or people start disappearing." "There has to be another way," Elena insisted. "If Mr. Blackwood finds out we've been letting criminals use his house, he'll never forgive us. Worse than that, he might hurt our family to send a message to others about loyalty." "He's not supposed to be back until tomorrow night," Diego replied. "Vincent said they just needed to use the place for one meeting, and then they'd leave us alone. They've been threatening Mama and Papa all week. What choice did we have?" Marcus felt his rage beginning to shift into something else. Elena and her family weren't betraying him willingly. They were being coerced by the Castellano family. This changed everything, but it also made the situation far more dangerous. If the criminals were threatening Elena's family, they had already made this personal. He moved closer to the kitchen entrance, wanting to hear more of the conversation between Elena and Diego. What he learned would determine how he dealt with the situation. As a vampire king, he had many options for handling threats, but most of them involved considerable violence. He needed to understand exactly what was happening before deciding on the best course of action. "How long have they been threatening the family?" Elena asked her brother. "About 2 weeks," Diego admitted. "Ever since Vincent found out where you work. He said he'd been looking for a way to get access to this place for months. Apparently, some of his competitors have been using it as a safe house, and he wanted to see what made it so special." Marcus's jaw tightened. Other criminals had been using his home? This was worse than he had imagined. Not only was his current staff being threatened, but apparently his house had become some kind of neutral meeting ground for various criminal organizations. The very idea was an insult to his authority. "Elena, we have to find a way to get them out of here," Diego continued. "I've got a bad feeling about tonight. Vincent keeps talking about some big score, and his men seem more nervous than usual. I think they're planning something that goes beyond just using the house for a meeting." Through the window, Marcus saw Elena's face clearly for the first time since arriving home. She looked exhausted and frightened, completely different from the confident young woman he was used to seeing. There were dark circles under her eyes, and her hands were trembling slightly as she spoke to her brother. "I've been trying to figure out how to contact Mr. Blackwood without making things worse," Elena said. "But Vincent has people watching our house, and they've made it clear that if anyone tries to interfere with their plans, the whole family will pay the price. Maybe we should just tell them Mr. Blackwood came home early," Diego suggested. "If they know he's here, they might leave on their own." Elena shook her head firmly. "You don't understand what Vincent is capable of. If he thinks we've been lying to him or trying to trick him, he'll assume we've been working against him all along. He might decide to eliminate witnesses." Marcus had heard enough to understand the basic situation. The Castellano family was using threats against Elena's relatives to force her cooperation. They had been using his mansion for criminal meetings, and tonight's gathering was apparently something bigger than their usual operations. As he prepared to enter the house and confront the criminals directly, Marcus heard Elena say something that stopped him in his tracks. "Stay silent," she whispered urgently to Diego. "I think I heard something outside. If Vincent's people think we're trying to communicate with anyone, they'll assume the worst." The Vampire King realized that Elena had heard his approach. Her human senses weren't as sharp as his supernatural ones, but she had been living in a state of high alert for weeks. She was probably listening for any sound that might indicate more danger for her family. Marcus decided to wait and observe a little longer. Elena's warning to her brother showed that she was still trying to protect everyone, even while being forced to cooperate with criminals. Her loyalty to her family was admirable, but her concern for his property and reputation suggested that her loyalty to him remained intact as well. What happened next would reveal the true depth of the situation and determine how Marcus would need to respond. As Vampire King, he had the power to end this threat permanently, but he also had a responsibility to protect those who served him faithfully. Elena and her family had served his household loyally for generations, and they deserved his protection, not his wrath. The question was whether he could save them without exposing his true nature or starting a war with the city's criminal underworld. As one of the most powerful supernatural beings in Louisiana, Marcus had many options, but he needed to choose carefully. The wrong move could endanger not just Elena and her family, but the careful balance he had maintained between the supernatural and criminal worlds for decades. From his position outside the kitchen window, Marcus continued to watch and listen, gathering information that would help him decide on the best course of action. What he discovered in the next few minutes would shock him even more than what he had already witnessed. Marcus remained hidden outside the kitchen window, his supernatural hearing picking up every word of the conversation between Elena and Diego. As he listened, the full scope of the situation began to reveal itself, and what he learned made his ancient heart pound with a mixture of rage and admiration. "Diego, listen to me carefully," Elena whispered, glancing toward the doorway to make sure none of Vincent's men were approaching. "I've been documenting everything they've done here for the past 2 weeks. Every meeting, every name mentioned, every criminal plan I've overheard. I've hidden everything in Mr. Blackwood's private study, behind the false panel in his bookshelf." Marcus's eyes widened in surprise. Elena had discovered his secret compartment? In 3 centuries, only 2 other people had ever found that hiding place, and both had been supernatural beings with enhanced senses. Elena was far more observant than he had given her credit for. "Why would you do something so dangerous?" Diego asked, his voice filled with concern. "If Vincent finds out you've been spying on him, he'll kill you without hesitation." "Because someone needs to stop these people," Elena replied firmly. "Do you know what they're really planning, Diego? It's not just about using Mr. Blackwood's house for meetings. Vincent has figured out that our employer is someone very powerful and wealthy, but he doesn't know exactly who. He's been using these meetings to study the house, learn the security systems, and plan a robbery." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. A robbery of his mansion would expose far more than just valuable antiques and artwork. His home contained centuries of supernatural artifacts, ancient texts, and evidence of his true nature. If criminals gained access to his private chambers, they might discover things that would endanger not just him, but the entire supernatural community in New Orleans. "That's not the worst part," Elena continued. "Vincent has been asking me detailed questions about Mr. Blackwood's schedule, his security measures, and especially about when he travels. He's planning to rob the house when he thinks it's empty, but he's also been talking about something called leverage." "What kind of leverage?" Diego asked nervously. Elena's voice dropped even lower, and Marcus had to strain his enhanced hearing to catch her words. "He's planning to kidnap members of the household staff to use as hostages. Vincent thinks that if he can grab the people Mr. Blackwood trusts, he can force him to pay huge ransoms and maybe even give him ongoing access to whatever business makes him so wealthy." The Vampire King's hands clenched into fists. The idea of criminals threatening his household staff was bad enough, but the thought of them trying to use Elena and her family as hostages filled him with a murderous rage. These humans had no idea what kind of predator they were attempting to threaten. "Elena, we have to find a way to warn Mr. Blackwood," Diego said urgently. "If Vincent goes through with this plan, people are going to get hurt. Maybe killed. I've been trying to figure out how to contact him without making things worse," Elena replied. "But Vincent has people watching our house constantly. Mama and Papa don't even know the full extent of what's happening." I told them Vincent just needed to use the house for a few business meetings. Marcus realized that Elena had been protecting not just his property but also her own family from the full truth of their danger. She was carrying the entire burden of this situation alone, trying to shield everyone while gathering evidence that could be used to stop the criminals. From inside the drawing room, Marcus heard Vincent Castellano's loud voice calling for Elena. "Hey, beautiful! We need more of that expensive whiskey. And bring some of those fancy glasses I saw in the china cabinet." Elena's face went pale, and she quickly composed herself. "I have to go back in there," she told Diego. "Stay in the kitchen and try to look busy. Don't let any of them corner you alone." As Elena prepared to return to the drawing room, Marcus saw something that made his blood run cold. She pulled a small knife from her apron pocket, checking to make sure it was securely hidden. Elena was prepared to fight if necessary, but a small kitchen knife would be useless against 5 armed criminals. Marcus watched as Elena walked back into the drawing room, her demeanor completely changing as she faced the criminals. She smiled pleasantly and moved gracefully among them, refilling their drinks and appearing completely comfortable. Her acting skills were remarkable, but Marcus could see the tension in her shoulders and the way she kept herself positioned near the exits. "Elena, sweetheart," Vincent said, his voice carrying the false charm of a practiced manipulator. "You mentioned that your boss keeps some very valuable items in his private study. I'd love to take a look at some of his collection." "With trust, Teddy. I'm sorry, Mr. Castellano," Elena replied politely, "but I'm not allowed to take guests into Mr. Blackwood's private areas. He's very particular about his privacy." Vincent's smile became predatory. "Come now, Elena. We've been friends for weeks now. Surely you can make an exception for someone who's been so generous to your family." Marcus saw Elena's grip tighten on the tray she was carrying. Vincent was testing her, trying to see how far he could push her before she either gave in or revealed her true feelings about the situation. "Mr. Blackwood trusts me to respect his privacy," Elena said firmly. "I won't betray that trust, not even for friends." One of Vincent's associates, a large man with scars across his knuckles, spoke up. "Boss, maybe the lady needs some encouragement to be more cooperative." Vincent held up a hand to stop him. "Patience, Tommy. Elena is a smart girl. She knows that cooperation is in everyone's best interest." "Don't you, Elena?" Marcus saw the threat clearly. Even if it wasn't spoken directly, Elena understood it too, but instead of backing down, she surprised everyone in the room, including Marcus. "Mr. Castellano," she said calmly, "I think there's something you should know about my employer." Vincent leaned forward with interest. "Oh? And what might that be?" Elena set down the tray and faced Vincent directly. "Marcus Blackwood isn't just wealthy. He's dangerous. Very dangerous. The kind of man who makes people disappear without a trace when they cross him." Marcus was shocked by Elena's boldness. She was essentially threatening Vincent, despite being outnumbered 5-1 in his own home. Vincent laughed, but there was less confidence in it than before. "Elena, sweetheart, I appreciate the warning, but I've been in this business for 20 years. I know how to handle rich men who think they're tough. Do you know how to handle men who have connections to every major criminal organization from here to Miami?" Elena asked. "Men who have judges, police commissioners, and federal agents on their payroll? And who can make entire families disappear without anyone ever asking questions?" This was completely untrue, but Elena was weaving a convincing story. Marcus realized she was trying to scare Vincent away from his planned robbery by making him think the target was far more dangerous than he had assumed. Vincent's expression became more serious. "You're saying your boss is connected?" "I'm saying my boss is the kind of man who doesn't just have connections," Elena replied. "He is the connection. Other powerful people come to him when they need problems solved quietly and permanently." Marcus watched as doubt began to creep into the faces of Vincent's men. Elena was taking an enormous risk, But her strategy was clever. Instead of revealing Marcus's supernatural nature, she was painting him as a criminal mastermind with resources and connections that would make him a dangerous target. "Don't be accurate if that's true," Vincent said slowly. "Then why would you help us? Why give us access to his house?" Elena's answer shocked Marcus even more than anything else he had heard that night. "Because he killed my cousin," she said, her voice filled with convincing hatred. "Maria Rodriguez disappeared 3 years ago after she started asking too many questions about Mr. Blackwood's business. Her body was never found, but I know he was responsible. I've been waiting for a chance to get revenge ever since." Vincent's eyes lit up with greed and opportunity. "So you want us to take him down?" "I want him to pay for what he did to my family," Elena replied. "But I also want to survive this. If you're going to move against Marcus Blackwood, you need to be very, very careful. One mistake, and none of us will live to see morning." Marcus felt as if he had been struck by lightning. Elena's story about her cousin was completely fabricated. Maria Rodriguez had died in a car accident 3 years ago, and Marcus had actually used his connections to ensure that Elena's family received a substantial insurance settlement. But Elena was using this fictional revenge motive to explain her cooperation while simultaneously trying to scare the criminals away. "What do you suggest?" Vincent asked, clearly intrigued by the possibility of targeting someone with significant wealth and power. Elena pretended to think carefully. "If you're determined to go through with this, you need much better planning. Mr. Blackwood has security systems you haven't seen yet, and he has people watching this house even when he's away. Your best chance would be to wait until he's traveling internationally, and even then, you'd need inside information about his security protocols." "You could provide that information," Vincent pointed out. "I could," Elena agreed, "but not tonight. Tonight is too soon. He's supposed to return tomorrow evening, and if he finds any evidence that strangers have been in his house, he'll know someone on his staff betrayed him. He'll interrogate everyone until he finds out who, and then..." She let the implication hang in the air. Marcus realized what Elena was doing. She was trying to convince Vincent to leave tonight and postpone any robbery plans. She was buying time, probably hoping that she could find a way to warn Marcus before the criminals returned. Vincent considered this for a long moment. "You make a good point. We don't want to rush into something this big without proper preparation." "Exactly," Elena said. "Give me a few more weeks to gather detailed information about his schedules and security. Then we can plan something that will actually work, instead of getting everyone killed." Marcus watched as Vincent weighed his options. The criminal was clearly tempted by the possibility of a bigger score, but he was also suspicious of Elena's sudden helpfulness. "All right," Vincent finally decided. "We'll postpone the main operation. But I want to see this private study you mentioned, just a quick look, to assess what kind of valuables we might be dealing with." Elena's face went pale, but she nodded. "I can show you the door, but I can't let you go inside. If he notices that anything has been moved or touched, he'll know someone was there." As Elena led Vincent and his men toward Marcus's private study, the Vampire King made a decision. He had learned enough to understand the situation completely, and he had heard Elena demonstrate remarkable loyalty and courage in trying to protect both his property and her family. It was time for Marcus Blackwood to come home. Marcus moved with supernatural silence through the servants' entrance of his mansion. His enhanced senses mapped the exact location of every person in the house. Elena and the 5 criminals were heading toward his study on the 2nd floor, while Diego remained nervously in the kitchen. The Vampire King had decided on his course of action, and it would require perfect timing. As Elena led Vincent's group up the grand staircase, Marcus slipped into the house through the kitchen door. Diego nearly dropped the glass he was washing when he saw the tall, imposing figure of his sister's employer appear like a shadow. "Mr. Blackwood," Diego gasped, his voice barely a whisper. "You're not supposed to be." Marcus placed a finger to his lips, signaling for silence, then spoke in a voice so low that only Diego could hear. "Your sister is in danger. How many men are with Vincent Castellano? Diego's eyes widened with fear and confusion. 5 men total, including Vincent. Sir, Elena didn't want to help them. They've been threatening our family for weeks. I know, Marcus replied calmly. Elena has shown remarkable courage and loyalty. Now I need you to do exactly as I say. Go to the phone in the butler's pantry and call 911. Tell them you're reporting a break-in at this address and that armed men are threatening the household staff. Then go outside through the garden door and wait by the fountain until the police arrive. What about Elena? Diego asked desperately. They'll hurt her if they think she betrayed them. Marcus's eyes glowed faintly in the dim kitchen light, a hint of his supernatural nature showing through. No one will hurt your sister. You have my word on that. Something in Marcus's voice convinced Diego that his employer was far more dangerous than any criminal. The young man nodded quickly and headed for the pantry to make the phone call. Meanwhile, on the second floor, Elena was leading Vincent and his men down the hallway toward Marcus's study. Her heart was pounding as she tried to think of ways to delay them or prevent them from actually entering the room. She knew that Marcus kept dangerous supernatural artifacts in his study, items that would raise questions no human criminal could answer. This is the door to Mr. Blackwood's private study, Elena said, stopping in front of an ornate oak door. But as I mentioned, I really can't let you go inside. If anything is disturbed, Elena, Vincent interrupted, his patience clearly wearing thin. I appreciate your concerns, but I need to see what we're dealing with. Tommy, check if the door is locked. The large man with scarred knuckles stepped forward and tried the handle. The door was indeed locked, but Tommy pulled a set of lockpicks from his jacket. Give me 2 minutes, boss. Elena felt panic rising in her chest. Once Vincent saw the contents of Marcus's study, her story about him being a dangerous criminal would become far more complicated. The room contained ancient books written in languages that no modern criminal would recognize, artifacts that looked more like museum pieces than stolen goods, and artwork that was clearly centuries old. If Mr. Blackwood has security cameras, relax, sweetheart, Vincent said with false confidence. We disabled the exterior cameras when we arrived, and Tommy checked for interior surveillance. Your boss might be connected, but he's still just a man. Elena almost laughed at that statement. If only Vincent knew exactly how wrong he was about Marcus being just a man. Tommy managed to pick the lock, and the study door swung open. Vincent whistled low as he saw the room's contents. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes, display cases containing what looked like priceless artifacts, and paintings that belonged in world-class museums. Now this is more like it, Vincent said greedily, stepping into the room. Tommy, start taking pictures of everything. We'll need documentation for insurance purposes. Elena followed them into the study, desperately trying to think of a way to prevent them from examining anything too closely. She positioned herself near the bookshelf where she had hidden her documentation about their criminal activities, hoping she could retrieve it if necessary. As Vincent moved deeper into the room, examining the valuable items, he stopped in front of a particular display case. Inside was an ornate golden chalice that seemed to glow with its own inner light. Beside it was a dagger with symbols carved into its blade that appeared to shift and move when viewed directly. What the hell is this stuff? One of Vincent's men asked nervously. Boss, some of this doesn't look right. That chalice is giving me the creeps. Vincent was too focused on the potential value to pay attention to his subordinate's concerns. These have got to be worth millions, he said excitedly. Elena, what can you tell me about these particular items? Before Elena could answer, the temperature in the room suddenly dropped by 20 degrees. The lights flickered, and a voice spoke from the doorway that made everyone freeze in terror. I can tell you about them. Marcus Blackwood stood in the entrance to his study, and for the first time since the criminals had entered his house, he allowed his supernatural nature to show partially. His eyes glowed with an otherworldly light. His presence seemed to fill the entire room with an aura of ancient power. And when he smiled, his fangs were clearly visible. Gentlemen, Marcus continued, his voice carrying centuries of authority and barely contained violence. I believe you're trespassing in my home. Vincent spun around, reaching for a gun inside his jacket, but he found himself unable to move. Marcus's supernatural abilities allowed him to influence human minds, and he was using that power to freeze the criminals in place. Elena, Marcus said, his voice becoming gentle as he addressed his maid, please step away from these men. You've done exceptionally well under very difficult circumstances. Elena moved quickly to Marcus's side, her relief evident on her face. Mr. Blackwood, I can explain. There's no need for explanations, Marcus interrupted kindly. I heard everything. Your loyalty to your family and to me has been remarkable. I'm only sorry that you've had to endure this alone for so long. Vincent managed to force words through his paralyzed throat. What are you? Marcus walked calmly into the room, his supernatural presence making the criminal's terror increase with each step. I am Marcus Blackwood, and this is my home. More importantly, Elena Rodriguez and her family are under my protection. You made a serious mistake when you threatened them. The police are on their way, Elena said quickly. Diego called them. Marcus nodded approvingly. Excellent. That will make this much simpler. He turned his attention back to Vincent and his men, his expression becoming deadly serious. Gentlemen, you have two choices. The first option is that I allow the human authorities to handle the situation. You'll be arrested for breaking and entering, attempted robbery, and criminal threatening. Given your records, you'll spend considerable time in prison. What's the second option? Vincent managed to ask, though he already suspected he wouldn't like the answer. Marcus's smile revealed more of his fangs. The second option is that I handled this personally, in the traditional manner of my kind. That option would be permanent. The sound of sirens began to grow louder in the distance. Marcus had timed everything perfectly. The police would arrive soon enough to arrest the criminals, but not so soon that they would witness anything supernatural. Elena, Marcus said, I want you to go downstairs and wait for the police. Tell them exactly what happened. These men broke into the house, threatened you and your brother, and were attempting to rob my study when I arrived home unexpectedly. Don't mention anything else you've witnessed tonight. Elena nodded and started toward the door, then paused. Mr. Pip Blackwood, there's something you should know. I've been documenting everything they've done here for the past 2 weeks. I hid all the evidence behind the false panel in your bookshelf. Marcus looked impressed. You found my hidden compartment? I noticed the slight difference in the wood grain, Elena explained. I thought it might be a safe place to hide evidence in case something happened to me. Remarkably observant, Marcus said with genuine admiration. We'll review that evidence together after the police have finished their work. As Elena left the room, Marcus turned his full attention to the terrified criminals. The sirens were getting closer, and he needed to ensure that these men never considered returning or threatening his household again. Vincent Castellano, Marcus said, his voice carrying supernatural compulsion, you and your men are going to confess to everything you've done. Breaking and entering, criminal threatening, attempted robbery, and anything else the police can prove. You will never return to this neighborhood, never threaten the Rodriguez family again, and never speak of what you've seen in this room tonight to anyone. The supernatural compulsion settled into the criminals' minds like steel chains. They would remember the break-in and their arrest, but the supernatural elements would fade from their memories like a half-remembered nightmare. Furthermore, Marcus continued, you're going to find religion in prison, Vincent. You'll discover that crime doesn't pay, and you'll encourage your associates to find legitimate employment. Your criminal organization will dissolve within a year, and you'll never commit another crime for the rest of your life. As the police cars pulled up outside the mansion, Marcus released his hold on the criminals. They immediately began babbling confessions, desperate to tell anyone who would listen about their crimes. The supernatural terror they had felt was transforming into genuine remorse as Marcus's compulsion took hold. 20 minutes later, Vincent Castellano and his 4 associates were being led away in handcuffs. The police had been amazed by their eagerness to confess not just to the night's crimes, but to numerous other illegal activities dating back years. Elena and Diego stood together in the mansion's foyer, watching through the windows as the police cars disappeared into the night. They were safe, their family was safe. "Elena," Marcus said, approaching his faithful maid, "I owe you an apology. Your family should never have been put in this position. My security arrangements were clearly inadequate if criminals could threaten my household staff without my knowledge." "You couldn't have known, Mr. Blackwood," Elena replied. "And we're all safe now, thanks to you." Marcus studied Elena's face carefully. She had seen enough tonight to realize that he was far from human, but there was no fear in her eyes, only curiosity and continued loyalty. "Elena," he said carefully, "you've served my household faithfully for 5 years, and tonight you've proven that your loyalty goes far beyond what anyone could reasonably expect. I want to offer you a choice." "What kind of choice?" Elena asked. "You and your family can continue working for me with a substantial increase in salary and security, but that would mean accepting that I am not entirely human. It would mean keeping secrets that most people could never imagine, and it would mean being part of a world that exists hidden within the ordinary one." Elena exchanged a glance with Diego, who nodded encouragingly. "What's the alternative?" she asked. "The alternative is that I ensure your family's financial security for life, help you relocate anywhere you choose, and remove all memories of tonight's supernatural events. You would remember only that criminals threatened you and I helped the police arrest them." Elena considered this for a long moment, then surprised Marcus with her response. "Mr. Blackwood, may I ask you a question?" "Of course. In 5 years of working for you, have you ever harmed an innocent person?" Marcus thought carefully before answering. "No, Elena, I have taken lives, but only to protect others or to punish those who committed terrible crimes. I do not harm innocents. Then I don't need to know all your secrets to know that you're a good man," Elena said firmly. "Whatever you are, you've been kind to my family and generous to your staff. You've protected us when we couldn't protect ourselves. I don't care if you're human or something else. I trust you, and I want to continue working for you." Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries, genuine surprise and gratitude. "Even knowing that I'm dangerous? Even knowing that working for me might expose you to supernatural threats?" Elena smiled. "Mr. Blackwood, tonight 5 armed criminals broke into your house and threatened your staff. You didn't call the police or hire more security guards. You came home and handled the situation personally. A normal employer might have fired me for putting his property at risk. You offered to erase my memories to protect my peace of mind. I think being protected by something dangerous is much better than being unprotected from ordinary human dangers." Diego spoke up for the first time since the police had left. "Besides, if you've been protecting New Orleans from supernatural threats for years, then you're helping our whole community, not just our family." Marcus looked at both siblings with something approaching paternal pride. "Very well. Elena, if you're certain of your decision, then we have work to do. Tomorrow night, I'll begin teaching you about the supernatural world you're choosing to enter. It's more complex and dangerous than you realize, but it's also more beautiful and wondrous than most humans ever imagine." "Will I need to learn how to fight vampires and werewolves?" Elena asked with a slight smile. Marcus laughed, a sound that held genuine warmth for the first time in decades. "Elena, my dear, I am the vampire you'd need to learn to fight. And as for werewolves, they're actually quite reasonable once you learn proper etiquette for pact negotiations." As the 3 of them stood in the foyer of the ancient mansion, a new chapter was beginning for all of them. Marcus had found humans he could trust completely with his true nature. Elena and Diego had discovered that their quiet employer was actually one of the most powerful supernatural beings in North America. And somewhere in New Orleans, the supernatural community would soon learn that the Vampire King had expanded his household to include humans who knew his secrets and shared his mission. The night that had begun with betrayal and threat had ended with loyalty proven and trust deepened. Marcus Blackwood had come home ahead of time to discover a maid who whispered, "Stay silent," not out of treachery, but out of a courage that had impressed a centuries-old vampire. What had unfolded had shocked him indeed, but in the best possible way. In the weeks that followed, Elena would learn about the careful balance Marcus maintained between the supernatural and human worlds. She would discover that her employer was not just the vampire king of New Orleans, but a protector who used his power to keep both worlds safe from those who would exploit or destroy them. Diego would eventually join the household staff as well, proving to have a natural talent for managing supernatural security systems. The Rodriguez family would become one of the most trusted human allies of the supernatural community, with their discretion and loyalty becoming legendary. And Marcus Blackwood would finally understand that true loyalty could not be compelled through supernatural power or purchased with money. It had to be earned through kindness, trust, and mutual respect. Elena had given him something he had thought impossible, a human companion who chose to stand with him knowing exactly what he was. The mansion on Royal Street would continue to stand as a monument to power, but now it also stood as proof that even the most ancient and dangerous supernatural beings could find family among those brave enough to see past the monster to the man underneath.